What would you do if your city quietly crossed a line so dangerous that people started changing their routines, staying home, and whispering the same warning to each other? Be careful. Well, this is Chicago, Illinois, and tonight we're talking about why residents are using the words shelter in place without any official order ever being announced. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, Illinois has already released more than 1,700 criminal illegal aliens after issuing ICE detainer requests. Now, these are not rumors. This is not speculation. Documented releases, including individuals that are tied directly to homicides, assaults, and weapons charges. Now, ask yourself this if you're watching the show tonight: if nothing is wrong, why is ICE sounding the alarm? Now, if this was compassion, why did it trigger emergency-style federal operations in neighborhoods instead of controlled jail transfers? Well, this didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened under Governor J.B. Pritzker's sanctuary policies, enforced at the state level and defended by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, even as public confidence collapsed. And now, with President Donald J. Trump back in the White House enforcing federal law, you are watching a direct collision between state defiance and national enforcement. And Chicago is caught right in the middle because people are not panicking because of headlines. They're reacting to reality. And tonight, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through exactly what actually happened, why it happened all at once, and more importantly, why this moment feels different, not just for Chicago, but for every city that's watching what comes next. Because when safety disappears quietly, that's when it's already gone. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Really appreciate your support, guys. So Chicago, Illinois did not drift into this moment. It slammed into it. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, Illinois refused to honor ICE detainer requests and release more than 1,700 criminal illegal aliens in a single year. Now, guys, that number matters. And it matters because this wasn't some slow trickle that quietly blended into the background. This was a mass release stacked on top of itself, creating this immediate shock to the system. Now, when that many individuals are released all at once, the impact is not theoretical. It is felt on the street. This is why Chicago became ground zero. Jails that should have transferred custody to ICE, they instead opened the doors. DHS has confirmed that these were not low-level paperwork cases. We're talking about individuals who are tied to some very serious offenses who were already in custody and should never have been released back into the community. And so when those releases happen simultaneously, the city doesn't have time to adjust. Police can't even rebalance resources. Neighborhoods cannot absorb the risk. The city just goes into a defensive posture. This is the moment Chicago crossed from policy debate into public safety crisis. And at that point, everything that followed flows from that single decision. No official announcement ever went out telling Chicago residents to shelter in place. And this is exactly why the phrase matters. Shelter in place didn't come from City Hall. It spreads from neighbors to families, from parents to group chats, from commuters that are deciding to stay home. This is how you know something broke. Something deeper broke. So when trust collapses, behavior changes long before press conferences even happen. People don't need government confirmation to recognize the danger. They respond to the patterns. DHS has laid out the crime profile connected to these releases: homicides, over 100 assaults, and multiple weapons cases. So when that information starts circulating, especially alongside visible ICE activity in neighborhoods, people connect the dots themselves. They alter their routines and they avoid public spaces. They warn each other quietly. So this is what shelter in place really means here. It's not a mandate. It is a survival instinct. It signals that residents no longer believe that the system is managing risk on their behalf. And once that belief is gone, fear fills the gap. Not panic, calculation. The kind that tells you something is off, and it's safer to pull back than to pretend that everything is normal. Now, let's go ahead and strip away the slogans just for a moment. Let's talk about what this actually means for the people on the ground in Chicago. This is not compassion. Compassion does not put families in a position where they feel safer staying at home. Compassion does not force parents to rethink bus routes, commutes, or evening routines. And compassion clearly does not involve releasing people with violent criminal histories back into neighborhoods already under strain. The people that are paying the price here, they're not politicians. They're commuters that are catching early trains, small business owners that are opening up in the morning, parents that are walking their kids to school. They didn't vote for this outcome, but they're living with it. And when Illinois, under Governor J.B. Pritzker, refused to cooperate with ICE, the risk didn't disappear. It was instantly redistributed downward onto ordinary residents. This is where the narrative breaks. You can call it mercy from a podium, but when the result is fear-driven behavior across a major American city, the label doesn't hold up. Public safety is a basic obligation of government. When that tells people to protect themselves instead, something fundamental has failed. And this is why this moment feels different, because the consequences are no longer abstract. Now, this is where a lot of people realize something uncomfortable. Most damage does not come from someone lying to you. It comes from not being told what you needed to know in time. Now, one of our viewers put it perfectly. He said, if I had known, I could have kept that money. But he didn't know because no one ever explained his Medicare plan to him. And that single mistake cost him $650. This is exactly why I partner with Chapter. They make sure that your Medicare coverage does not punish you for knowing the right questions to ask. No pressure. There's no sales games, just clarity before damage is done. Now, most people, they don't even realize that they're overpaying until it's too late. And by then, well, the money's gone for good. Now, if you want someone to actually review your plan and explain it in plain English, people are ready for your call at the phone number down below. You can call my friends at Chapter at 909-563-8279, or you can click the link down below at askchapter.org/Ron. And let my friends over at Chapter know Ron says hello, because whether it's public safety or your finances, what you don't know is exactly what cost you. Now, here's the part most people are missing. Immigration and Customs Enforcement wasn't asking to conduct neighborhood raids in Chicago. According to the Department of Homeland Security, ICE made repeated formal detainer requests asking local jails to simply hold criminal illegal aliens already in custody so federal agents could take control safely and quietly. No street operations, no confrontation, just a transfer inside of a secure facility. Illinois said no. Now, that refusal is exactly what changed everything. When jails release individuals instead of honoring detainers, ICE loses the safest moment to act. When the person is already disarmed, contained, and separated from the public. The alternative is far more dangerous, locating the person after release in residential areas with unknown surroundings and unknown associates. Now, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a policy choice. And once that choice was made, the outcome was predictable. ICE warned state officials that refusing cooperation would push enforcement into neighborhoods. Now, those warnings, they were completely ignored. Now, what followed wasn't escalation. It was inevitability. When you block the safest option, you force the riskiest one. And so this is the direct chain reaction that leaders in Chicago and Illinois pretend doesn't exist. When local jails refuse to cooperate with ICE, enforcement doesn't stop, it relocates. So instead of controlled transfers inside of secure facilities, agents are forced to find individuals after release in real neighborhoods with real bystanders nearby. That's not strategy. That is damage control. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and city leadership continue to defend sanctuary policies as if they reduce harm. Now, in reality, they manufacture risk. Every refusal to honor a detainer pushes enforcement out of the jail and into apartment complexes and parking lots and residential streets. That increases danger for agents, for residents, and even for the people being arrested themselves. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. None of this is necessary. DHS has been very clear. ICE wanted custody before release and not after. But sanctuary policy blocks that cooperation by design. So when people see federal vehicles in neighborhoods, it's not because enforcement escalated. It is because the safest option was deliberately taken off the table. The policy doesn't prevent arrests. It guarantees that they happen in the worst possible place. So this is why Chicago doesn't feel normal right now. Cities don't need official lockdowns to change behavior. People react to signals, increased enforcement activity, warnings circulating online, neighbors that are sharing stories, routines quietly shifting. When uncertainty spikes, caution takes over. Residents aren't waiting for City Hall to explain anything. They're responding to what they see. Federal agents searching neighborhoods because jails won't cooperate. Criminal histories surfacing after releases, and leadership insisting nothing's wrong. That disconnect right there is what creates fear, not hysteria, awareness. People stay home because they don't trust that the system is in control. They reroute because they don't know who was released or where enforcement might show up next. That's not panic, it's adaptation. And once a city reaches that point, you don't reverse it with some press statements. You restore confidence by restoring order. Now, until that happens, Chicago will just keep on behaving like a city, bracing for impact because, well, from the residents' perspective, that's exactly what's happening. Now, at some point, responsibility moves up the chain, and in Illinois, it stops at Governor J.B. Pritzker. This isn't just a Chicago problem. It's a statewide policy wall that blocks cooperation even when local conditions deteriorate. Now, sanctuary rules are not suggestions. They're enforced constraints that prevent sheriffs, wardens, and local agencies from honoring ICE detainers, regardless of risk on the ground. Now, here's the part that really matters. When crime spikes or releases pile up, city leaders, they can't pivot even if they wanted to. The policy's baked in at the state level. This is why it feels like paralysis. DHS can present data, ICE can issue warnings, neighborhoods, they can react. But the mechanism to change course is sealed shut by design. This really reframes the crisis. It's not city mismanagement alone, it is state-enforced immobility. So when Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration defends sanctuary compliance as non-negotiable, this guarantees the same outcome every single time that conditions worsen. No cooperation, delayed enforcement, and higher public risk. The wall doesn't protect communities, it prevents adaptation when communities need it the most. Now, the Department of Homeland Security isn't treating this as a local controversy, and that's deliberate. Chicago's geography turns policy failure into a national concern. Sitting at the very center of this country with major interstate corridors and rail hubs, the city functions as a distribution point. So when high-risk individuals are released here, the consequences, they don't stay within city limits or even within Illinois. And so this is why DHS escalated its language. Released offenders can move quickly into neighboring states, establish operations, or even disappear into secondary jurisdictions that never even knew the release happened. Now, that mobility transforms a local refusal to cooperate into a broader enforcement blind spot. Now, from DHS's perspective, this is not just unsafe, it's destabilizing. This also explains the urgency behind federal warnings. Once individuals leave custody, the window to act narrows dramatically. Tracking becomes harder, risk multiplies, and the burden shifts from prevention to response. This is why DHS frames this as more than a sanctuary debate. It's about how a central hub, when unmanaged, can amplify risk nationwide, quietly, efficiently, and out of view. Now, ICE doesn't issue public warnings lightly. This is what makes this moment stand out. When Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security went public about the release in Illinois, it wasn't about optics, it was about urgency. And this wasn't a leak that was meant to embarrass local leaders. It was a sign that the risk had already crossed a threshold. Here's why this matters. ICE prefers quiet, procedural enforcement, transfers from jail, minimal disruption, and no spectacle. When that system is blocked and warnings are ignored behind closed doors, the only remaining option is to alert the public, not to scare people, to explain why enforcement activity suddenly becomes visible and unavoidable. This was ICE saying plainly, look, we tried to do this a safe way. The refusal to cooperate forced a different approach. And the consequences are now being shared by everyone in Chicago. This is why the warning landed the way it did. It wasn't political theater. It was a last step after institutional channels failed. And when federal agencies reach that point, this is because they believe silence would be more dangerous than transparency. So this is where the conflict becomes unmistakable. President Donald J. Trump, now back in the office, is enforcing federal immigration law through DHS and ICE, lawfully, directly, and with state priorities focused on criminal offenders. Now, that posture, it hasn't changed. What has changed is the level of resistance from sanctuary states like Illinois. So the key point is not arrest, it's authority. The federal government is asserting its role in enforcement. Meanwhile, state leaders under Governor J.B. Pritzker is asserting the opposite: refusal, non-cooperation, and policy shields that block federal action. That collision is exactly what you're seeing play out in Chicago. Now, ICE, they're doing exactly what it's legally required to do. DHS is backing those actions with data and warnings, and states are betting that resistance will outlast enforcement. This is not chaos. This is a power struggle over who controls public safety decisions. And the people caught in the middle are not politicians. They're residents, commuters, and neighborhoods that are absorbing the fallout while governments argue over jurisdiction. That's the real tension driving this moment. Now, this doesn't repeat by accident. It repeats because the incentives reward it. In Chicago and across Illinois, sanctuary policy creates a feedback loop that quietly reshapes who stays, who leaves, and who decides elections. As crime and disorder rise, the people who move are those with options. Families with kids, small business owners, workers who prioritize stability. They don't bother protesting. They just pack up their bags and relocate. Now, what remains is a smaller, more ideologically uniform electorate that rewards leaders who double down. That's the incentive here, guys. Fewer dissenting voices, fewer consequences at the ballot box, and a permanent jurisdiction for more control. Meanwhile, public safety costs are socialized into neighborhoods that can least absorb them. Now, from the federal side, DHS and ICE are left managing outcomes instead of preventing them. Enforcement becomes harder, more visible, more dangerous, which then, of course, fuels the same political messaging that sustains the policy. That is a closed loop right there. Disorder produces fear, fear drives migration, migration locks in the power. No single release causes it, but mass releases accelerate it. And this is why this keeps on happening even after the warnings are issued and the data is public. And so this is the part that no one wants to say out loud. Chicago is not the exception. It's the preview. When a city reaches the point where residents quietly act as if a shelter in place exists, trust has already collapsed. And once trust collapses, rebuilding it takes more than speeches. It takes consequences. So what happened here wasn't sudden chaos. It was the predictable result of policies that removed guardrails and they dared reality to cooperate. Illinois refused to cooperate with ICE, period. DHS warned what would happen next. And the releases continued, and residents, they just adjusted in the only way that they could, by protecting themselves. That's the warning shot, not just to other cities, but to every leader that's pretending that this is sustainable. Public safety is not operational, it's ideological, and it doesn't negotiate. So when law enforcement breaks down, people feel it immediately. They feel it in where they go, how they live, and what they avoid. This is what's happening when policy outruns responsibility, and once a city crosses that line, the cost is paid by everyone who didn't make the decision, but they have to live with it.